Okay, so today we will be looking at the 80 to 90 word writing task for your GCSE exam at Excel. We will be looking at the top banding of the mark scheme, so how to achieve the grade 5 in this task. The total mark for this question is 20. The breakdown is 12 marks for communication and content, and then you have 8 marks for linguistic knowledge and accuracy. So in the following slides, we will look closely at the mark scheme criteria, we will look at some worked examples, and we will also look at how to use our structure strip to help us with planning and structuring our writing. Okay, so let's have a look closely at the mark scheme criteria for communication and content. So what do we need to do in order to score the top marks in a top band? Now, it states very clearly that we have to communicate information relevant to the task. That means we need to answer all 4 bullet points. It is stating very clearly that we need to extend our ideas, so expand the key points and the ideas in order to score our top marks. We need to be able to effectively adapt our language to narrate, to inform, and to interest. We need to give convincing personal opinions, so it's asking us to give our opinions on the key points and justify them, explain them. So using connectives like because, I think that, even though would be good ideas. It's asking us to give frequent examples of creative language to use and express individual thoughts. Okay, so using language creatively, not just looking at basic sentences, looking at a variety of vocabulary, so some interesting vocabulary and expressions. So we're not looking at words like, because it's interesting, because it is boring, because it is fantastic. We're looking at some really interesting vocabulary like it's relaxing, it's tiring, it's impressive, and so on. So some examples of uncommon language. We also have to use the appropriate register as style. Okay, so that means if it's a letter to a friend, it needs to be addressed as a letter to a friend. If it is more formal letter, we need to use the correct register for formal letter. And throughout the writing, we should have minimal inconsistency. So these are the top instructions for us to follow. So looking at this section of the mark scheme for the linguistic knowledge and accuracy, so what do we need to do in order to score the 7 to 8 marks in the top banding? It's very clear that we have to use some variation of grammatical structures and occasional complex structure. So it's asking us to use not just simple sentences, but maybe using things such as modal verbs, using verb inversion, even looking at structures like subordinate clauses where you use your while, ich denke das, or obwohl. It is asking us to frequently produce extended sentences. So again, going back to that the sentences are not simple. We are extending them. They are well linked. So using connectives like und, aber, denn, our language needs to be generally accurate, including the structure. So it's not asking us that it has to be 100% accurate, but generally accurate. So, so the odd errors will be inevitable, but we need to be able to know how to use these structures. It is asking us that we need to include successful references to past, present, and future events. So being able to use past tense, whether it is perfect tense or imperfect tense, using your present tense correctly, including correct verb endings, being able to structure and use your future tense correctly. It is okay to have occasional errors, which could hinder the clarity of the communication. But as it states here, these errors are occasional, okay, not consistent and not all the time. So these are the linguistic elements that we need to include in order to score the top marks in the top band. So here we have got an example of a task. Remember, when you do the 80 to 90 word task, you will have a choice between 2 tasks, either task 1A or task 1B. You do not answer both. You look very carefully at each task and decide which task suits you the best. which task can I write quite a lot about, which task can I expand on, or the topic of the task to be precise. So if you look at this task talks about school, specifically Schulstress, so stress at school, and your task is asking you to address this topic. So the task background is, deine Freundin Lena möchte wissen, wie stressig dein Schulleben ist. So your friend Lena would like to know how stressful is your school life. It is also asking you to write an email. Schreibe eine E-Mail an Lena. So we're looking here at informal register because you're writing to your friends, so it does need to read like an email. So you might want to start with, hello Lena, how are you? It also very clearly states what you must include. Du musst diese Punkte einschließen. Remember, from the marking criteria for content and communication, it is asking you to get the top marks that you include and answer all key points. That means all 4 bullet points. And your points are, warum du Schulstress hast. So why do you have stress at school? So it's asking you to give reasons and justifications. In the second bullet point, it is asking you, was du letzte Woche in der Schule gemacht hast. So what did you do last week in a school? And here you've got to use past tense. Perfect tense or imperfect tense, okay, but you've got to show that you can use past tense confidently. Now, third bullet point is asking again an opinion. Ob die Lehrer helfen oder nicht, so whether your teachers help or not. So we're looking again at justifications and reasons and examples how they help. And the last bullet point, where you normally would demonstrate use of your future tense. You can use future tense, but here it's actually using conditional because you've got wie dein Schulleben nicht so stressig sein könnte. So könnte being used in a conditional. So what could you do for your school life not to be so stressful? How could your school life not to be so stressful if you were really literal? But you could use here conditional, and it's asking you to write approximately 80 to 90 words in German to answer this task. So this is your scenario. This is what you have to think about. So here we are now looking at the linguistic knowledge and accuracy. So what kind of structures, grammatical structures we have to consider? So we will have to give in the first bullet point reasons for school stress. So we're looking at sentences like ich finde die Schule stressig, weil, or ich habe Stress in der Schule, weil ich viele Prüfungen habe. So looking really at giving reasons and justifications. So using your weil, using your ich denke das, and so on. So if you look at the second bullet point, we know very clearly from the second bullet point that we have to use past tense. So when we talk about past tense, we have got choice of the perfect tense, so using ich habe or ich bin with your past participle, but also using maybe imperfect tense like ich war, ich hatte. So letzte Woche hatte ich Mathe, Deutsch und Englisch in der Schule. Or you could have letzte Woche habe ich Mathe, Deutsch und Englisch gelernt. Die Woche war sehr stressig. So we are using obviously your war. And looking at a variety of structures in a past tense. In a third bullet point, where we talk about the teachers, again, it's asking us about opinions and using our opinions. And again, these opinions for the top marks really need to be justified. So using your weil, your das, your obwohl, even your wenn. So for example, obwohl ich die Schule stressig finde, sind die Lehrer sehr hilfsbereit. Would be a good structure. And here you're demonstrating use obwohl at the start of the sentence, which then follows the rule verb, comma, verb, especially here. So that's a really good grammatical structure to use as well. In the fourth bullet point, we could use a conditional. Okay, normally it is future tense, but this task is actually using conditional. So using the structures like wäre, könnte, hätte, with when would be really good. And this is really something which you could use even for the 130 to 150 word task. And it is something which would be really something visible for the higher paper. Wenn ich mehr Zeit hätte, könnte ich mich entspannen und dann würde ich nicht so viel Stress haben, would be an interesting structure. But really, this structure is, in my opinion, personally, more for a higher paper and more suitable for the 130 to 150 word task. Okay, so here we can see a worked example of the task 1A. In this response, we can see that the candidate has addressed all 4 bullet points very clearly and extended the ideas. This candidate has actually scored the top marks in both bands for the communication and content, as well as for the linguistic knowledge and accuracy. We can see here that the candidate understood very clearly that they have to write an email, and he or she is starting the response as an email with Liebe Lena, and then carries on, Hallo, wie geht's? We can see that the first bullet point is fully communicated and extended. It actually starts with a very interesting structure using wegen. Wegen der wichtigen should be Prüfungen gibt es zu viel Druck in der Schule. Now, this response, personally, from my point of view, would be a response of a higher candidate, because I would class this as a higher candidate structure, really, than foundation. Remember, in a 80 to 90 word task, because it's a crossover task, which appears on the foundation paper, but also on a higher paper, candidates can score the highest grade 5 only. But looking at the structure, this would be structure which could be very easily used in 130 to 150 word task, and it would be classed as a complex structure. Then we carry on here. Und ich finde das irrsinnig stressig. Now, I personally really like the irrsinnig, irrsinnig, wahnsinnig. It almost reads like a native speaker response, and it makes the language really interesting and creative. Now, the second sentence then starts with obwohl. So again, really good complex structure. Obwohl ich oft wiederholt habe. Now, what we can observe here, because the obwohl is used at the start of the sentence, candidate is then using the rule verb, verb. So very clearly aware of the grammatical rules of, verb, verb. Habe ich im Moment Angst. Now, the end bit is a little bit not fully correct. It would probably read better. Obwohl ich oft wiederholt habe ich im Moment Angst, dass ich schlechte Noten bekomme. That will be probably clearer response to the structure. But the first bullet point, fully covered, fully extended. Now, looking at the second bullet point, it is very clear that we had to write response in a past tense, and we can see the word letzte Woche, which is a clear indicator of a past tense. We can then observe the use of imperfect tense. So, letzte Woche langweilte ich mich zu Tode. Now, I also like the zu Tode because that's using an idiom. So, again, making the language interesting and creative. Further on, we're carrying on using perfect tense, haben gelernt, and we're using wir version, so not ich version. So, wir haben eine Doppelstunde von Erdkunde gehabt, would be probably better. And then candidate carries on with the zu phrase. Mehr zu revisieren, wiederholen would be better. But again, it's very clear that the candidate can use the zu phrase correctly. Aber die Lehrerin konnte gar nicht gut erklären. So we got here modal verb in a past tense, and again, grammatically, candidate knows that the second verb in its infinitive form has to go at the end. Maybe it would be better, die Lehrerin konnte gar nicht gut unterrichten, would be a little bit clearer. But then the next sentence again is creative use of language, glücklicherweise. Here it's clear that the candidate knows that verb is second idea in a German sentence, so using the verb inversion. And again, correct use of perfect tense, habe ich am Mittwoch mit Freunden, probably an einem Tanzclub, teilgenommen would be better. But again, the candidate knows the past participle from teilnehmen and is aware of that the GE goes between the prefix and the rest of the verb and uses the teilgenommen past participle correctly. And then the response is again finished using perfect tense. Das hat viel Spaß gemacht. Okay, again, not using ich form, we got hat and gemacht. Fully covered bullet point. Third bullet point is asking the candidate to express an opinion about teachers and whether they help or not. Interesting start using meines Erachtens. Now, often I see candidates using meiner Meinung nach. That's the classic. Meines Erachtens is more unusual and again creative. Sind die meisten der Lehrer ziemlich hilfsbereit? So meistens is not 100% correct here, but it's very clear what the candidate wants to say. Communication is conveyed. Meine Geschichtslehrerin hat sogar einen kleinen Wiederholungsbuch. The gender is not right here. Ein kleines Wiederholungsbuch geschrieben. So again, past tense, perfect tense, hat geschrieben using the third person singular, correct form of the past participle. And then we've got also example of imperfect tense. Ich fand das echt. I like the echt as intensifier, nützlich. Third bullet point fully covered, extended, interesting ideas expressed, creative use of language. Looking at the third bullet point, where the candidate had to address and respond to the bullet point on what could you do so your school life is not so stressful. And we starting here again with zur phrase. So, Leistungsdruck in der Schule zu reduzieren, the phrase used correctly. Sollten wir, so we have here again modal verb in the past tense, sollten wir mehr Freizeitmöglichkeiten haben. So remembering again using modal verb, second verb in infinitive goes at the end of the sentence. And the final sentence again starts with a wenn phrase. Wenn being used at the start of the sentence. So wenn ich mit meinen Mitschülerinnen etwas Neues. I like the use etwas Neues because here we got the adjective used as a noun. Machen könnte, so using conditional. Wäre ich immer in einer guten Laune. Okay, so again, maybe the gender, the dative is not 100% correct here. But the structure, the communication is conveyed. I like the use wenn, machen, könnte, being able to use the word order correctly. And it is really complex structure. Many of these structures that would be really suitable for 130 to 150 word task, where these structures would score the candidate really top marks in a top band, even for the grade 8/9. So extending a little bit more to making 130, 150 word tasks would be really a good idea. And personally, I think this response is a response of a higher candidate and is well beyond the grade 5. It is also finished nicely with a question, was denkst du? And then we have bis bald. I mean, that should be as 2 words with a capital B, but it is a nicely finished, very clearly structured piece of writing, easy to read, lots of creative language used, interesting variety of vocabulary, secure knowledge of grammatical structures, really, really good response. Okay, so here you can see a structure strip which we have been using in the past. So it breaks down the writing for you and helps you with your planning and structuring it. It is asking you to write at least 90 words and making it clear that you have to cover all bullet points. This year, the exam board will give you the instructions and the bullet points in English. So why do you have stress at school? What did you do at school last week? Whether the teachers help or not, and how could your life not be so stressful? What could you do in order for your life not to be so stressful? So in order to help you structuring and planning your writing, you clearly know that you have to cover 4 bullet points. So you're writing an email, so start it as an email, maybe allocate about 20 to 25 words to write a little bit about your school, details about your school, why you have stress at school. So in der Schule habe ich Stress, weil ich zu viele Prüfungen habe or weil ich zu viel Druck habe, and so on. Then have a look at how you could structure and respond to the second bullet point. So here you need to write about what did you do in a school last week, what lessons you did, what did you do in a break time, using your past tense, look at some complex opinions and give some reasons. For the third bullet points, again, you are going to be writing about teachers and whether you find them helpful or not helpful. You could use comparatives and superlatives. You need to justify your opinions. So you can compare teachers to each other. You can say who is the best teacher. And then in the last bullet point, okay, again, allocate around 25 words to the response. What could you do so your life is not so stressful? Try to use maybe conditionals, your wäre, hätte, könnte. You could even use using the sentences and structures with when, or your own phrases. Don't forget to finish your writing as an email. So, maybe writing your bis bald or schreib bald would be a nice finish, including your name.